The crystalline spires of Zephyria's capital city caught the light of 3 suns. Representatives from 12 species sat in their designated atmospheric pods, each one maintaining the precise environmental conditions their biology required. The air itself was a patchwork of different gases, temperatures, and pressures, separated by invisible force fields that created distinct biospheres within the vast hall. Commander Thexali of the Vorthan Empire stood at the central podium, his arms gesturing with practiced precision as holographic displays materialized around him. His exoskeleton gleamed with integrated circuits that pulsed with bioluminescent data streams, each flicker representing calculations beyond human comprehension. The crisis on Kepler-4 to be demanded immediate action, and time was running out. The situation deteriorates by the hour, Thexale announced. Mining colony designates 7 alpha houses, 3,847 workers from 9 different species. The automated defense grid has malfunctioned, sealing all external access points while simultaneously flooding the internal atmosphere with compound X7, a byproduct of the rare earth extraction process that proves lethal to most oxygen-breathing life forms. The holographic display shifted, showing a cross-section of the mining facility. The structure was a marvel of engineering, built into the heart of a dead volcano where the geological pressure had created unique mineral formations. Tunnels and chambers carved through superheated rock created a labyrinthian network that stretched 4 kilometers in every direction. Now, those same tunnels had become a death trap. Counselor Veltar of the Krillian Consortium leaned forward in her pod, her chitinous form clicking against the biomechanical interfaces that connected her directly to the facility's sensor network. Environmental readings show internal temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Celsius in the upper levels, with toxic gas concentrations increasing by 12% every standard hour. The facility's fusion reactor is showing signs of magnetic containment failure. A collective shudder ran through the assembled delegates. Magnetic containment failure meant more than just a reactor explosion. It meant the exotic matter at the core would destabilize, potentially tearing a hole in space-time itself. The blast would vaporize everything within a 500-kilometer radius and render the entire planet uninhabitable for millennia. Our response teams are prepared, announced High Technician Zixera of the Zephyrian Collective, her energy form crackling with barely contained power. Our phase walker units can manipulate electromagnetic fields to create safe corridors through the toxic atmosphere. Combined with our quantum tunneling technology, we can bypass the sealed access points entirely. The Vorthon's representative activated a series of holographic schematics. The Imperium's biomechanical exoskeletons are rated for extreme temperature environments. Our Neuralink technology will allow operators to maintain perfect coordination, even in the electromagnetic chaos the facility's malfunction has created. Each species presented their solution with growing confidence. The TH-Kalians volunteered their psionic abilities to communicate with trapped workers through solid matter. The aquatic collective's environmental suits could function in any atmospheric condition. In the far corner of the chamber, almost forgotten in the rush of technological solutions, Dr. Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human observation pod. Unlike the others, her environmental requirements were simple: standard atmospheric pressure, 21% oxygen, comfortable temperature range. She wore no biomechanical enhancements, no neural interfaces, no energy manipulation devices. Her equipment consisted of a worn leather satchel, field clothes that had seen better days, and boots that showed the scuff marks of countless archaeological expeditions. Sarah had been studying the ancient ruins on Kepler-4 for to see. As the only human representative within range, she'd been required to attend the council session. She listened to each species' presentation with growing interest, taking notes in a physical notebook with an actual pen, technology so primitive that several delegates had never seen its like. The coordination will be seamless, Exela continued, his confidence growing with each technological marvel presented. Our combined capabilities represent the pinnacle of galactic civilization. We will have the workers evacuated within 6 hours, well before the reactor reaches critical failure. Sarah cleared her throat quietly. Commander Thexali, if I may. The Vorthon's compound eyes focused on her with visible irritation. Protocol demanded that all representatives be heard. but the human's presence was largely ceremonial. Her species had joined the Galactic Council only recently, and their technological contributions were limited. Dr. Chen, while we appreciate your species' interest in the proceedings, this situation requires immediate action from those equipped to handle it. Perhaps you could document the rescue efforts for your academic research. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. The Zephyrians' energy forms flickered with what their species considered humor. Even the normally stoic Nexari allowed their liquid metal forms to shift into patterns that suggested mirth. Sarah stood slowly, seemingly oblivious to the condescension. "I'd like to volunteer for the rescue mission." Then, as if a dam had burst, the laughter began in earnest. Vexali's mandibles clicked rapidly, producing the harsh sound that marked Vorthan amusement. "Human, your species lacks even basic environmental adaptation. You have no natural armor, no energy manipulation capabilities, no enhanced physiology. Your technology is paused, searching for a diplomatic phrase. ... Quaint. You breathe standard atmosphere," added Veltar, her voice carrying the harmonic patterns of Krillian superiority. "You require narrow temperature ranges to survive. Your bones are hollow calcium compounds that would shatter under the pressure differentials in that facility. What could you possibly accomplish that our advanced teams cannot?" Sarah nodded thoughtfully, as if considering their words carefully. She picked up her leather satchel and held it up for the chamber to see. "This belonged to my great-grandmother. She was a metallurgist who helped design the first human space stations. Before that, her grandmother was a chemist who developed early terraforming catalysts. Before that, ... She paused, looking directly at Dexali. Before that, her grandmother was a blacksmith who could shape metal with nothing but fire and skill." The delegates exchanged glances. Where was this primitive human heading with her genealogical rambling? "You see advanced technology," Sarah continued, gesturing at the holographic displays and biomechanical interfaces surrounding them. "Every tool, every solution, every technological marvel, they're all just different ways of controlling the same fundamental forces." Several delegates leaned forward, their enhanced sensors struggling to identify what appeared to be a simple stick with a chemical compound attached to one end. "This is a match," Sarah said quietly. "Wood and phosphorus. When struck against a rough surface, it creates a controlled chemical reaction that produces heat and light. My species has been using variations of this technology for over 1 million years." The chamber was quiet now, the earlier amusement replaced by puzzled attention. Sometimes, Sarah concluded, placing the match carefully back in her satchel. "The old ways are the best ways." Vexal's voice carried barely concealed impatience. "Historical perspective, we have a crisis to resolve. Our advanced teams are prepared to deploy immediately. Perhaps you could observe from the command center and provide commentary for the historical record." The other delegates murmured agreement. Sarah simply nodded and returned to her seat, her expression calm and patient. As the advanced rescue teams prepared to deploy their cutting-edge technology, none of them noticed the quiet confidence in the human's eyes, or the way her fingers traced the worn leather of her ancestral satchel. They were about to learn that evolution didn't always mean improvement, and that sometimes the most primitive technologies were the most powerful of all. The first rescue team deployed with the confidence of a civilization that had conquered entropy itself. High Technician Zixera led the Zephyrian Phasewalker unit, her energy form crackling with barely contained power as she materialized at the facility's main entrance. Her team of 12 specialists flickered in and out of visible spectrum, their bodies composed of pure electromagnetic energy contained within quantum field matrices. Beginning phase shift penetration, Zixera transmitted, her voice a harmonic frequency that resonated through the communication arrays. Electromagnetic barriers are substantial, but within acceptable parameters for our technology. The phasewalkers began their approach, their energy forms shifting through the visible spectrum as they prepared to bypass the sealed blast doors. The facility's exterior gleamed with the dull sheen of neutronium steel alloy, a material so dense that most conventional weapons would barely scratch its surface. But the Zephyrians didn't need to break through. They could simply phase their molecular structure to slip between the atoms themselves. The first phasewalker reached the blast door and began the delicate process of quantum tunneling. For a moment, her energy form began to shift, becoming translucent as she prepared to pass through solid matter. Then, without warning, her carefully controlled electromagnetic matrix, destabilized arcs of wild energy, erupted from her form as she was violently ejected backward, her quantum coherence scattered across the visible spectrum. Zixara to command came the strained transmission, encountering unexpected electromagnetic interference. The facility's malfunction has created a chaotic field that's disrupting our phase coherence. We cannot maintain molecular stability in this environment. Commander Thexel's mandibles clicked with irritation as he watched the energy readings spike across his biomechanical displays. The electromagnetic chaos is worse than anticipated. Deploy the Krillian exoskeleton units. Counselor Veltara's chitinous form gleamed as she activated her Neuralink interfaces. Krillian, Assault Unit Alpha, you are cleared for deployment. Show these energy riths how real technology handles adversity. The Krillian rescue team approached the facility like an army of mechanical titans. Their biomechanical stood 3 meters tall, each one a masterpiece of organic engineering fused with quantum-enhanced technology. Razor-sharp plasma cutters extended from their arm assemblies, while their reinforced carapaces contained enough processing power to run a small city. Squad leader Kethrix activated his plasma cutters, the superheated energy beams capable of slicing through molecular bonds themselves. Beginning breach procedures, these blast doors will not withstand Krillian engineering. The plasma cutters struck the neutronium steel with a brilliant flash of light. For a moment, it seemed as though the technology would prove superior to the facility's defenses. Then the readings began to climb. The ambient temperature around the facility was higher than anticipated, and the exotic radiation leaking from the malfunctioning reactor was interfering with the plasma containment fields. Temperature rising beyond acceptable parameters, Keth reported, his voice tight with strain. Exoskeleton cooling systems are at maximum capacity, but internal temperatures are approaching critical levels. The biomechanical suits began to overheat, their organic components literally cooking within their quantum-enhanced shells. Steam began to rise from the Krillian exoskeletons as their internal cooling systems failed, overwhelmed by the combination of plasma heat and environmental radiation. Krillian units, withdraw immediately, Veltar commanded. Her clicking intensifying with what her species considered embarrassment. We cannot maintain operational capacity in this environment. The Vorthon Imperium's turn came next. Their quantum phase technology was different from the Zephyrian approach. Instead of shifting through matter, they could temporarily relocate themselves 2 parallel dimensional phases where solid barriers didn't exist. Commander Thexali personally led the assault, his 4 arms interfacing with quantum processors that could calculate probability matrices across infinite dimensional variants, initiating quantum phase displacement. Thexali announced, his harmonic voice carrying the confidence of his species' technological superiority. The facility's barriers exist only in this dimensional phase. We will simply step around them. The Vorthon team activated their quantum phase generators, reality shimmering around them as they began to shift into parallel dimensional space. For a moment, they seemed to succeed. Their forms became translucent, existing partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Then the toxic atmosphere within the facility began to interact with their quantum fields in ways their scientists had never anticipated. The gas mixture wasn't just toxic, it was quantum active. Its molecular structure destabilized by the radiation leaking from the failing reactor. As the Vorthon team tried to phase through the barriers, the toxic compounds began to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, following them through their quantum displacement. "Command, we have a problem," Thexal transmitted, his voice distorted by dimensional interference. "The toxic atmosphere is phase coherent. It's following us through the quantum barriers. We cannot escape contamination by dimensional displacement." One by one, the Vorthon team members began to destabilize as the toxic compounds interfered with their quantum phase generators. Their forms flickered between dimensions, trapped in a quantum superposition that threatened to tear their molecular structure apart. Quantum phase technology is ineffective against phase-coherent toxins. The pattern continued with devastating consistency. The Nexari liquid metal technology could flow through microscopic cracks, but the superheated metal corridors caused their molecular structure to boil and separate. The Tokalian psionic abilities could communicate through solid matter, but the electromagnetic chaos scrambled their telepathic signals. The aquatic collective's environmental suits could function in any atmospheric condition, except one that was actively changing its molecular composition due to radiation exposure. As the fourth rescue attempt failed catastrophically, the command center fell into stunned silence. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations, with technology that could reshape matter and bend spacetime itself, had been defeated by a simple industrial accident. Dr. Sarah Chen had watched each attempt with growing interest, taking notes in her primitive notebook while the aliens' sophisticated sensors recorded terabytes of failure data. She observed the way the toxic atmosphere interacted with energy fields, how the superheated metal affected plasma containment, how the radiation interfered with quantum coherence. Each failure taught her something new about the environment they were facing. The reactor instability is accelerating, reported the facility's automated systems, their synthetic voice carrying across the command center. Magnetic containment will fail in 4.7 standard hours. At current rate of atmospheric contamination, worker casualties will reach 100% in 3.2 standard hours. The assembled delegates looked at each other with growing desperation. Their most advanced technologies had failed completely. The workers were dying, and the reactor would soon explode with enough force to crack the planet's crust. Sarah stood, slowly, her worn leather satchel in her hands. "I'd like to try now." The chamber turned to look at her with expressions that ranged from desperation to disbelief. Commander Thexela's compound eyes focused on her with barely contained frustration. "Human, our most advanced technology, has failed. Quantum phase generators, plasma cutters, electromagnetic field manipulation, all of it useless against this environment. You have nothing but your bare hands and primitive tools." Sarah walked toward the facility entrance, her boots making soft sounds against the crystalline floor. The alien sensors tracked her movement, noting her elevated heart rate, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she checked and rechecked the contents of her satchel. She was afraid any rational being would be, but she was also determined. "This is not the time for your species' irrational heroics," Dexeli continued, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones of genuine concern beneath the condescension. "The environment will kill you in minutes. Your primitive biology cannot survive what our advanced technology could not overcome." Sarah paused at the entrance to the facility, looking back at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Steam rose from the superheated metal around the blast doors, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with toxic compounds. The electromagnetic chaos was visible as dancing aurora patterns across the facility's surface. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't have energy suits or quantum phase technology. I don't have plasma cutters or biomechanical exoskeletons. I don't have any of the advanced tools that your civilizations have developed." She reached into her worn leather satchel and withdrew a simple wooden match, its head coated with a mixture of phosphorus and potassium chlorate. The primitive chemical compound seemed laughably inadequate compared to the quantum processors and electromagnetic field generators that had already failed. The facility's entrance chamber was a testament to industrial engineering. Massive neutronium steel beams supporting a ceiling that disappeared into shadows. Emergency lighting casting harsh geometric patterns across surfaces that gleamed with condensed moisture. The air itself was visible, a roiling mass of toxic compounds that shimmered with an oily iridescence. The temperature readings on the alien sensors showed 89 degrees Celsius and climbing. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped into this hellscape with the calm deliberation of someone who had spent her life studying the remnants of dead civilizations. Her first breath should have killed her instantly. The toxic atmosphere was a cocktail of industrial compounds that would dissolve the lung tissue of most species within seconds. Instead, she reached into her leather satchel and withdrew what appeared to be a primitive breathing apparatus. "Fascinating, Commander," Exali muttered, his biomechanical sensors tracking her every movement. "The human is using some form of atmospheric filtration system. Crude, but ... "It's not crude," interrupted Dr. Veltar, her katana's form clicking with agitation as she analyzed the readings. "The filtration efficiency is remarkable. How is she achieving molecular separation with such primitive materials?" Sarah's rebreather was indeed ancient by galactic standards, a simple mechanical device that relied on activated carbon crystals and a series of chemical filters her great-grandmother had taught her to prepare. No power source, no quantum processors, no electromagnetic field generators, just chemistry, physics, and the accumulated knowledge of a species that had learned to survive in hostile environments long before they reached the stars. She moved deeper into the facility, her boots splashing through puddles of condensed atmospheric moisture. The corridor ahead was blocked by a massive blast door that had warped under the extreme heat, its neutronium steel surface twisted into impossible angles. The alien rescue teams had tried to cut through it with plasma weapons, quantum phase, generators, and molecular disruptors. All had failed. Sarah knelt beside the door and began removing items from her satchel. To the watching aliens, the objects looked like archaeological artifacts, metal powders in glass vials, simple ceramic containers, lengths of magnesium ribbon. She mixed the powders with practiced precision, creating small piles of what appeared to be rust-colored dust. "What is she doing?" Zixara transmitted, her energy form flickering with confusion. Those appeared to be chemical compounds, primitive chemical compounds. "Iron oxide and aluminum powder," Sarah said quietly, knowing her communications device would carry her voice to the command center. "Thermite burns at 2,500 degrees Celsius. Your plasma cutters failed because they required complex magnetic containment fields to function. This just requires a match." She placed the thermite charges at precise points along the warped blast door, then withdrew a simple ignition device, a magnesium ribbon connected to a chemical fuse. The watching aliens held their breath as she lit the fuse with another wooden match. The thermite ignited with a brilliant white flash that overwhelmed the sensors in the command center. When the light faded, the blast door had been cut in two precise sections, the superheated metal cooling with sharp cracking sounds. What had taken the aliens' most advanced technology hours to attempt unsuccessfully, Sarah had accomplished in minutes, using chemistry that her species had mastered centuries before spaceflight. "Impossible," Bexley breathed, his mandibles clicking with disbelief. The metallurgical precision required to cut neutronium steel at those exact stress points. "Our quantum processors couldn't calculate the optimal placement." Sarah picked up a piece of the cooling metal, examining the cut edge with professional interest. "I didn't calculate it. I felt it. Metal expands and contracts in predictable patterns when heated. My species has been working with metal for thousands of years. We learned to read its behavior long before we had computers to do it for us." She moved deeper into the facility, encountering chamber after chamber of obstacles that had defeated the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, where the Nexari liquid metal technology had boiled and separated in the superheated corridors. Sarah used simple evaporative cooling, wet cloth wrapped around her neck and wrists. Taking advantage of her species' natural thermoregulation through perspiration, the electromagnetic chaos that had disrupted the Zephyrian phasewalkers posed no threat to her primitive equipment. Her chemical reactions didn't require electromagnetic fields to function. They relied on molecular bonds and atomic interactions that existed independent of quantum coherence or energy manipulation. In the reactor chamber, she encountered the heart of the crisis. The fusion reactor was a masterpiece of engineering, a contained star that provided power to half the planet. Now it was dying, its magnetic containment fields failing as exotic. Matter threatened to tear holes in spacetime itself. The radiation levels were lethal to most species, and the electromagnetic interference made it impossible for advanced technology to function. Sarah approached the reactor core with a mixture of awe and determination. This was beyond her expertise. She was an archaeologist, not a nuclear engineer. But she understood the fundamental principles at work. The reactor was overheating because the cooling systems had failed, and the cooling systems had failed because the radiation was interfering with their quantum processors. From her satchel, she withdrew several ceramic vessels filled with what appeared to be ordinary clay. The watching alien's sensors analyzed the material and found it to be exactly that. Clay mixed with specific mineral compounds that occurred naturally on dozens of worlds. "She's going to try to cool a fusion reactor with mud," Veltar transmitted, her clicking intensifying with what her species considered hysteria. "The radiation will vaporize any organic material instantly." Sarah began spreading the clay mixture. Around the reactor's cooling intakes, her movements quick and efficient, despite the lethal environment. Not mud, she corrected, her voice steady despite the radiation counter on her belt, clicking frantically. Bentonite clay mixed with boron compounds and rare earth elements, it absorbs specific radiation frequencies and converts them to harmless heat. The clay began to glow as it absorbed the exotic radiation, its molecular structure shifting to accommodate the energy input. Sarah had prepared the mixture based on geological samples from the planet's surface, using techniques that combined advanced chemistry with traditional pottery methods her ancestors had developed millennia ago. The reactor temperature is stabilizing, reported the facility's automated systems, their synthetic voice carrying a note of surprise. Magnetic containment fields are holding steady. How is this possible? Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead, the radiation counter on her belt finally beginning to slow its frantic clicking. Sometimes the most advanced solution is the simplest one. Your quantum processors couldn't function in this radiation field, but clay doesn't need quantum processors. It just needs to absorb and convert energy, something it's been doing naturally for billions of years, but the most crucial test was yet to come. The trapped workers were in the deepest section of the facility, where the life support systems had failed completely. The atmosphere was not just toxic, but completely depleted of oxygen. The workers were dying of asphyxiation, and conventional oxygen supplies would be contaminated by the toxic compounds within minutes. Sarah reached the final chamber to find 3,847 workers from 9 different species huddled together in the last pocket of barely breathable air. Their biomechanical life support systems had failed hours ago, and they were slowly suffocating in the toxic atmosphere. Some were already unconscious, their metabolisms shutting down as their bodies fought the inevitable. The aliens in the command center watched in stunned silence as Sarah began removing items from her satchel. Not advanced atmospheric processors or quantum air purifiers, but simple chemical compounds that looked like they belonged in a museum. Potassium chlorate, sodium peroxide, iron powder materials that had been used for emergency oxygen generation since the early days of human space exploration. She's going to try to generate oxygen using chemical reactions, Dexley transmitted, his voice carrying disbelief. In a toxic atmosphere, the contamination will kill them all. Sarah began mixing the compounds with practiced efficiency, creating small piles of what appeared to be ordinary chemical powder. Chemical oxygen generators, she explained, her voice steady despite the desperate situation. They don't require power, don't need electromagnetic fields, don't rely on quantum processors. They just need heat to trigger the reaction. She lit the first generator with a simple flare, the chemical reaction producing a steady stream of pure oxygen that began to fill the chamber. The toxic compounds in the atmosphere couldn't contaminate the oxygen, because it was being produced faster than the contamination could spread, creating a bubble of breathable air around the trapped workers. The oxygen concentration is rising, reported the facility's sensors, their readings showing life-giving gas flooding the chamber. Worker vital signs are stabilizing. How is she maintaining such precise atmospheric control? Sarah moved from generator to generator, lighting each one with simple chemical ignition. Fire, she said simply. These don't change just because you've invented better tools. She struck a match, its flame casting dancing shadows across the faces of beings from a dozen different worlds. We kept fire because fire is honest. It tells you exactly what it needs to function, and it does exactly what you expect it to do. There's no quantum uncertainty, no electromagnetic interference, no biomechanical compatibility issues. Just fuel, oxygen, and heat. The Krillian student nodded, her understanding evident in the way her mandibles clicked. She struck her match successfully, the simple chemical reaction producing a flame that seemed to contain more triumph than any quantum processor could generate. Fire, Sarah concluded, was humanity's first teacher. It taught us that the most powerful forces in the universe are often the simplest ones. Everything else we've learned since then is just a variation on that theme. As the training session continued under the alien stars, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations learned to work with their hands, to understand chemistry through direct experience, to control combustion with the same instinctive knowledge their ancestors had possessed. They were becoming something new, not just technologically advanced, but fundamentally wise. The rescue on Kepler 4:4 to be had, proven that evolution didn't always mean abandoning the old ways. Sometimes it meant perfecting them so completely that they could accomplish what the newest innovations could not. In learning to control fire, the galaxy had learned to control itself. The evacuation proceeded with methodical efficiency that would have impressed any military commander. Sarah had created a safe corridor through the facility using nothing but controlled combustion, chemical reactions, and an understanding of fundamental physics that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had forgotten they possessed. Worker after worker emerged from what had been considered an impenetrable death trap, their faces streaked with soot, but their eyes bright with the knowledge that they would live to see another day. The final count was absolute: 3,847 workers. Successfully evacuated, 0 casualties, reactors stabilized, and cooling within acceptable parameters. The facility that had defeated quantum phase generators, plasma cutters, and electromagnetic field manipulators had been conquered by a human archaeologist with a leather satchel and an understanding of fire that stretched back to humanity's earliest days. Dr. Sarah Chen emerged from the facility as the last worker was loaded onto the medical transport, her face streaked with soot and her clothes stained with the residue of a dozen different chemical reactions. Her primitive rebreather hung around her neck like a medal of honor, its simple mechanical components having functioned flawlessly in an environment that had destroyed the galaxies most sophisticated technology. The assembled aliens stood in stunned silence as she approached the command center. Commander Thexale's biomechanical sensors tracked her every movement, analyzing the thermal signatures of the chemical compounds that still clung to her clothing, the way her human metabolism had adapted to the extreme environment, the calm confidence in her stride despite having just accomplished the impossible. Thexale began, his harmonic voice carrying undertones of something that might have been reverence. What you have accomplished today defies everything we understood about technological capability. Our most advanced civilizations, with tools that can manipulate matter at the quantum level, failed completely. Yet you succeeded using. He paused, searching for words that could encompass what he had witnessed. Using primitive chemistry and simple combustion reactions. Sarah set down her worn leather satchel and began removing the remaining contents, laying them out on the command center's crystalline surface, like an archaeologist displaying artifacts. Wooden matches, chemical powders, ceramic vessels, lengths of magnesium ribbon items that belonged in a museum, not a rescue operation. That's where you're wrong, she said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just proved her point in the most dramatic way possible. These aren't primitive tools, they're fundamental tools. There's a difference. Dr. Veltar leaned forward in her atmospheric pod, her chitinous form clicking with intense curiosity. Please explain the distinction. Dr. Chen, our analysis suggests that these materials represent technology that our species abandoned millennia ago. In favor of more advanced alternatives, Sarah picked up one of the wooden matches, holding it. Up to the light of Zephyrus' 3 suns, when your species developed energy manipulation, you stopped needing fire. When you mastered quantum phase technology, you stopped needing to understand matter at the molecular level. When you created biomechanical processing systems, you stopped needing to calculate thermal dynamics manually. She struck the match against a rough surface, the simple chemical reaction producing a flame that danced in the filtered atmosphere of the command center. But fire isn't just about heat, it's about transformation. It's about understanding how energy moves through matter, how molecular bonds can be broken and reformed, how chemical reactions can be controlled and directed. The flame reflected in the compound eyes of the assembled delegates, in their biomechanical sensors, in their quantum-enhanced displays. Such a simple thing, yet none of their civilizations had retained the knowledge to create it without advanced technology. Every chemical reaction, Sarah continued, every energy transfer, every process that sustains life, they're all different forms of fire. When you evolved past the need for combustion, you lost touch with the fundamental forces that govern the universe. High Technician Zixara's energy form flickered with patterns that indicated deep contemplation. You're suggesting that our technological advancement actually represents a form of ... regression. Not regression, Sarah corrected, extinguishing the match and placing it carefully back in her satchel. Specialization. Your species became incredibly skilled at manipulating specific aspects of reality, energy, matter, quantum states, biological processes, but in becoming specialists, you lost the generalist knowledge that my species never abandoned." She opened her satchel wider, revealing its true contents for the first time. What the aliens had assumed were primitive tools were actually sophisticated applications of fundamental principles. The chemical compounds weren't random powders, but carefully prepared mixtures that could produce specific reactions under precise conditions. The ceramic vessels weren't simple pottery, but advanced materials, science applied using traditional techniques. "While you were mastering quantum mechanics," Sarah explained, "we were perfecting chemistry. While you were developing energy manipulation, we were learning to control combustion with surgical precision. While you were creating biomechanical processors, we were studying how organic and inorganic materials interact at the molecular level." Commander Thexali's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep thought in his species. "You're saying that humanity's apparent technological backwardness is actually a form of parallel advancement?" "We took a different path," Sarah confirmed. "Your civilizations reached for the stars and found amazing technology. We reached for the stars and brought our fire with us. Every human ship, every colony, every settlement, we carry the knowledge of combustion, chemistry, and fundamental physics because we never stopped needing them." She gestured toward the facility where the last of the evacuation transports were. "Departing, your quantum phase generators failed because they required stable electromagnetic fields. Your plasma cutters failed because they needed complex magnetic containment. Your biomechanical systems failed because they couldn't adapt to an environment that was actively changing. But fire," she continued, "fire just needs fuel, oxygen, and heat. It doesn't care about electromagnetic interference. It doesn't need quantum processors. It doesn't require perfect environmental conditions. It just burns, and in burning, it transforms everything it touches." Dr. Velter's clicking intensified as she processed this information. "You're suggesting that your species' mastery of fundamental forces makes them more adaptable than our advanced technology." Sarah smiled, the expression carrying warmth despite the soot stains on her face. "I'm suggesting that advancement isn't always about complexity. Sometimes it's about understanding simplicity so completely that you can make it do impossible things." The implications began to ripple through the assembled delegates. Here was a species that had been considered technologically primitive, yet they possessed knowledge that could accomplish what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could not. The humans hadn't fallen behind in the technological race. They had been running a different race entirely. "There's something else," Sarah added, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "This rescue operation revealed vulnerabilities in your technologies that hostile species could exploit. Electromagnetic interference, quantum field disruption, thermal overload. These aren't just environmental hazards, they're potential weapons." The silence in the command center was profound. The assembled representatives realized that they had been looking at galactic security through the lens of their own technological assumptions. An enemy that understood fundamental forces could potentially neutralize their most advanced defenses. "Using simple chemistry and physics, you're offering to help us," Thexali said, his harmonic voice carrying a note of understanding. "To teach us what your species has learned about fundamental forces," Sarah nodded. "Fire was humanity's first technology. It will probably be our last. Everything else is just fire with better marketing." She paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives of 12 different species. "But there's no reason we can't share what we've learned." The vote was unanimous. Dr. Sarah Chen became the first human appointed to the Galactic Council's Emergency Response Division, tasked with developing new protocols that combined advanced technology with fundamental principles. Her appointment marked the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization, one where progress was measured not just by technological complexity, but by the ability to understand and control the basic forces that shaped reality. 3 months later, training facilities on 17 different worlds hosted mixed classes of alien students learning what Sarah called primal physics. The curriculum covered everything from basic chemistry and thermodynamics to advanced applications of combustion and molecular manipulation. The students, despite their advanced civilizations, approached the classes with the enthusiasm of children discovering fire for the first time. The training ground on HFY had become particularly popular. Under the light of three suns, representatives from across the galaxy gathered around simple campfires,